Welcome back to College Football Addiction. I'm going to talk about the game of the week, one of the games of the year this week, taking place on Saturday, Oregon, Ohio State. Zach Smith, Menace to Sports. How you doing, bud?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm good. We're surviving. There's a lot of wind and rain outside, but nothing real crazy here in Tampa. So anybody that is in the path, we're certainly thinking about you, and there's a lot more important things than football. But maybe this will give you a nice 15-minute distraction from that, and you can
Right.
go back to battening down the hatches and everything else. But yeah, doing well. 5-0, Ohio State beating teams the way that they should beat them. What is just very, very 30,000 foot impressions of really how this season has started for the Buckeyes from you?
I think they've checked every box. I mean, everything. If they're going to win a national championship, or at least be there at the end, you have these steps you have to take, like walking up the stairs, and they've taken every step. I mean, they had their moments of unexpected and inexcusable adversity, but it was like one play here or there, and of course, some Buckeye fans lost their mind when Will Howard got sacked by Akron. It was like, oh my God, we're terrible. Fire Ryan Day, but they've improved every week, and I think the offensive line improvement is noticeable. The Chip Kelly impact is, it's felt at every position on offense. I mean, the receivers went from arguably, I don't even know if it's arguably, the worst stalk blocking group I've ever seen to one of the best in the country this year. So the impact that Chip Kelly's had on Justin Fry as O-line coach, Brian Hartline as a receiver coach, and the offense as a whole is, it's almost indescribable how much better they are. And then the defense has been just outstanding to watch. Last year, they didn't really disrupt the football, create turnovers, and they really didn't sack the quarterback. And Jim Knowles was, the defensive coordinator, was often, in media interviews and everything, kind of saying that that's not their goal. Like that's not what they're trying to do. Well, that's their goal this year. They're absolutely doing it. And so it's fun to watch. But at the same time, they haven't faced an offense like this, Oregon offense, and nothing really close. So it's going to be a true test for the defense.
What have we talked a little bit about Will Howard during the offseason, and you certainly had some concerns then. Have you been pleased? What have your thoughts been on him specifically, and the way that he's played 5 games in?
I think he has improved as much as he needed to improve to do what they want to do. I mean, they're so loaded at the receiver position in the running back room, and he's a good athlete. He's actually surprisingly fast, and he's exactly what they needed. He's improved throwing the football under 20 yards compared to the Kansas State film that I studied. And so that's more important than anything. The one thing that hasn't really improved, and it's been kind of his Achilles heel so far, is throwing a deep ball. He's only attempted 8 on the year, one of the lowest in major Power 5 football. He just doesn't throw it well. And I keep going back and forth. As a receiver coach, I'm like, that's a big problem because corners are going to sit on routes. Like if you can't hit them up top, that's a problem. Yeah. But some of the stuff they're doing with the quick screens and RPOs and the freaky athletes they have at receiver. I mean, you throw Jeremiah Smith a hitch and he takes it 70 yards. It's like, well, there's your deep ball. Like how you like that. So I hope it doesn't rear its ugly head, but it is a little problematic. But ultimately, his job is to get the ball to playmakers and protect the football. And most importantly, that no one talks about, he's got to make the offensive line right. Ohio State had a quarterback last year in Kyle McCord that made the offensive line wrong when sometimes they weren't wrong. And you just can't have that. It's too hard to block some of these freaky pass rushers. You have to have a quarterback that can navigate the pocket, knows when to escape, extend plays, and he's done that. So I think he's been outstanding for Ohio State.
All right, I got one more big picture, and then we'll talk about Oregon. But you mentioned him. Buy or sell this. Jeremiah Smith is going to end up as the best wide receiver to ever play there.
Oh, I know this. He's the best freshman wide receiver to ever play here. So unless they can't develop him, which Brian Hartline has an insane track record of development, I don't see how he's not the best receiver that ever played here. I mean, what he's doing as a freshman, especially early in the year, like I was around Percy Harvin at Florida. I recruited Chris Olave, who kind of broke out later in his freshman year against Michigan, had 2 touchdowns, blocked a punt. But the first 4 weeks, he didn't even play. Percy Harvin, we had a package for him. He played like 10 plays his first 2 games. And it's like you saw the talent, but he wasn't ready yet. Jeremiah Smith walked on campus, grown-ass man ready. I really think he could play in the NFL right now.
Yeah, it's kind of unfair that I mean, it's great for Ohio State. It's kind of unfair to the rest of college football and him that he has to come back for 2 more years
I know, right?
because he is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I still think he's a tier above, but seeing what he and Ryan Williams are doing is
Oh, dude.
just outrageous. How good this freshman receiver class really is, just
Yeah.
dominating.
I don't think we've ever seen two true freshmen, and Ryan Williams is 17, like two real true freshmen, like not got held back and they're 19 or 20 years old as a freshman. No, you're talking about real freshmen that are taking over college football like this. I think they're the two best receivers in the country as true freshmen.
Yeah, their play has been just absolutely remarkable, and maybe if the football gods love us enough, we can see an Alabama Ohio State game at some point down the road,
That'd be awesome.
because that'd be ridiculous.
It'd be awesome.
Oregon had started kind of slow, had some pretty head scratching games to start, but they do seem to have rounded into form a little bit better. Just again, kind of like I asked Ohio State, overall 30,000 foot impressions of them before we get into a deep dive.
I think I'm most disappointed with Oregon up front on both sides of the ball. I mean, they're the 76th best rushing offense in the country and the 74th best rushing defense in the country. And that's not because they played, Penn State and the two-headed monster that they have at running back. I mean, you're talking about Idaho ran the ball on them. I know Ashton Jeanty is a Heisman front runner, but he popped off for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. And it's not about the running back, right? It's about the linemen. Like, how are they getting blocked that well? And so that's the biggest concern that I see for Oregon. And Dylan Gabriel he's a dealer. He's like a dealer at a blackjack table. He doesn't throw the ball downfield. It's a lot of short throws, but he's the most efficient passing offense in college football is Oregon. 81% completion percentage. And they just get the ball out and catch it. And it's not going to be 25-yard throws. So they move the ball. And I mean, they clearly score points and have been able to win these games. But there's just I always talk about fraud tendencies, right? They have some fraud tendencies. You can have some gay tendencies. Doesn't mean you're gay, but they have some fraud tendencies. And I'm not saying they're a fraud, but they got some tendencies.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe you just said that, but I'm dying right now.
You never know.
And he was taking care of the ball pretty well in the first half of the first several games. 2 turnovers on kind of inexplicable throws in the Michigan State game last week on Friday night. How do you think he specifically matches up with Ohio State's secondary and I guess Gabriel plus the wide receivers match up with that Ohio State defense?
Well, it's just going to depend on what Jim Knowles decides to do. He's gotten the defensive coordinator of Ohio State. He's gotten. I don't know if it's because of the lower talent level, but he's played a ton of off coverage, especially with Davison Igbinosun, who's a starting corner that transferred from Ole Miss 2 years ago. And Davison is about as physical a corner as I've seen on film this year, but he thrives in press man coverage, and he's been playing him off coverage, and he's kind of struggled just because his forte is press. And I believe that Jim Knowles is doing that to develop him as an off corner so he can do both. But if they're going to play off coverage, Oregon is going to get those free yards. You give them free yards, they're taking free yards. I think Ohio State needs to come up, press them, and make Dylan Gabriel throw it down the field. Make those receivers get open downfield. And if they do that, I think Ohio State matches up great with this Oregon team. I like Jordan James. I think he's a really good running back. But, I mean, Ohio State has, even against Caleb Johnson from Iowa, who's an outstanding back, they shut him down. I mean, they've been shutting down the run. And I don't think Oregon's better than Iowa up front on the offensive line. So I have faith in the third best rushing defense in the country. And I just want these corners to come up and press and challenge the shit out of these receivers because they are loaded at receiver. Yeah. Loaded.
He can also move pretty well with his legs. And you say, how do you defend the quarterback run? Well, nobody does it incredibly well because it's just a numbers issue. But Ohio State equipped pretty well if he starts to take off a little bit.
Yeah, you know what? They have kind of the player that I think is going to be the most impactful player, Sonny Styles. 5-star out of high school, safety, started at safety last year, converted to linebacker. He's what I've said for, I don't know, a decade. Ohio State doesn't have that they have down south. That linebacker that can go sideline to sideline and is like a safety, but in a bigger body. Yeah. And so I think he along with Arvell Reese, kind of the sophomore linebacker that's come on from Glenville. And then Cody Simon, the 3 linebackers. I think they're athletic. This is the most athletic group of linebackers I've seen at Ohio State since Ryan Day took the job. So I think they'll be they're going to cause fits for this offense with what they're doing up front with the defensive line, and then this more athletic version of Ohio State's linebackers. I think they're well equipped to kind of, I don't know about shut them down, but to manage and kind of limit Dylan Gabriel and what Dan Lanning's doing on offense.
I hate the cliche, but I'm gonna say, like games won in the trenches. I get it, but I mean, and you mentioned this a little bit already, so you don't have to like dive deep super into it. But like, you like Ohio State's both sides of the line against Oregon's, or is there one that worries you a little bit more than the other?
No, I mean, I really do. I think Ohio State is solid up front, and I think that is, if there's one weakness, I mean, on offense, it's definitely Oregon's offensive line. Like I mentioned it, Jordan James, I think, is a fantastic back. Dylan Gabriel's highly efficient, a really good player. The trio of receivers is stupid. Tez Johnson, Evan Stewart, and Trayshawn Holden have been, I mean, they're electric. So if there's a weakness at Oregon, it's the offensive line, and probably one of the strength of the defense is really up front for Ohio State.
What is it the wide receivers that maybe worries you the most in this game, or is there a matchup in this game, or maybe it's just being on the road? Like what in this game from the Ohio State perspective probably worries you the most?
Well, I mean, we've seen it, in Ohio State's losses, like when they lost to Michigan, it's Jim Knowles gets very aggressive, especially with teams with equal talent. And that's a feast or famine, right? You got to make tackles. You got to stay in your gaps. You got to be able to hold coverage. And if they do that, I think they could completely dismantle this Oregon team. That's hard to do with the electricity that Oregon has on offense. So honestly, my biggest concern is a guy gets beat off the line and he doesn't have help, and that's a big play. A kid gets out of a gap and there's not really a second level because they're so down low to try to limit the run game that he gets through a crease and there's nobody left. I mean, that's how Michigan has beat Ohio State. It's been a handful of big plays. And this is the only other opponent I can even equate, unless we're going to go way back, is this Oregon team to the Michigan team last year. Not near stylistically, but just as far as like the quality of athlete, the caliber of ball carrier that they're going to have both on the perimeter and in the backfield.
I guess we're halfway through the week, so we're not super far away from it. But right now, Ohio State a 3-point favorite on the road to go in and win the game. How, do you have a lean in this? Have you made a prediction yet? Like, how do you think this thing ends up going?
I think Ohio State covers. I mean, I think as long as they don't turn the ball over, that's the biggest thing. If Will Howard is going to all of a sudden turn into a turnover machine, which he hasn't been, if the running backs are going to put the ball on the ground, which they haven't, I think they have one fumble in the entire year so far. As long as they stay true to that, I think Ohio State wins this by 7-10 points. I know I have never been, but I've been told this lure of Oregon Stadium, the potato chip with the acoustics and all this other bullshit, that is going to be really loud. Like, these kids have played at Penn State at night. They've played at Michigan. Like, I'm not saying it's not going to be loud, but it's not going to be their first time hearing some noise.
Yeah. I think, I saw that a lot in the offseason when a certain fan base basically counted on their crowd to win them the game. And then Miami came in and scored nearly 50 in the swamp. And so I do think, and I don't think that's the only thing Oregon fans are counting on to win this game. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But when there's so much put into like, it's just impossible to win in this stadium, and you're not talking about like the matchups or the trenches or this, that, and the other, which again, I'm not saying Oregon fans are doing that. But when the focus is so much on the crowd noise and not the actual game, red flag alert,
Yeah,
like
no doubt.
Crowds can win games. Weird things happen to Jordan Hare. Weird things happen in Baton Rouge. Weird things happen in, but
it's no different than when Big Ten fans are like, oh, the home playoff game. I can't wait for Alabama to come up to Penn State and play in the cold. You're like, I hate to break it to you. They're going to beat the brakes off of Penn State in the cold.
Ryan Williams is going to forget how to catch the ball.
Right.
Milroe's going to slow down by 20 miles an hour, so.
Right.
Zach, you do a great job with like film breakdowns and a lot of inside scoop on different things. Where can people follow you and find more of your work?
The best, I mean, all social media, Menace to Sports, that's where everything goes out. We have a website, menacetosports.com, where we do all kinds of stuff, the message boards, but the biggest thing is the film breakdowns. I tell people all the time, like I think I provide a decent amount of knowledge, having been a college football coach for 13 years, but even if it's just to see the all 22 film, like, it clears up reality so much when you watch and you say, oh my God, this guy was horrible. And then you watch the film, you're like, where was he horrible? Yeah. Like, I'm watching it. Show me. So that's probably the best thing we do other than our daily show. So they can find us there, YouTube, all the other places, podcasts.
Yeah, that all 22 is a lifesaver. I was watching somebody do a film breakdown of the Florida State Clemson game from this week, and it was just from the broadcast footage, which, if that's all you have available, that's all you have available. But he literally said, I can't tell what coverage we're in because of the way the camera angle was. And I was just like, well, you're telling like 30% of the story then because what coverage they were in matters a lot for what happened and how the quarterback moved it. So yeah, I agree. We appreciate you for all that you do and hanging out with us for a few minutes today, man.
Hell yeah, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, buddy.